Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be doing my October reading wrap up, and this will be a quicker than usual, I think, wrap up because I read 4 books in the month of October. They were all books that I really enjoyed, which is great, but 4 isn't as high as it usually gets for me. Not that it's bad. 1 a week is really what I'm shooting for all the time. But yeah, 4 books were read, but 2 of them I've already talked about quite in depth. So I posted a reading vlog earlier in the month of October where I was reading basically really popular books and talking about whether or not they were overhyped or not for me. And the 3 books that I read for that video were Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died, Babel by RF Kuang, and then Trust by Hernan Diaz. I'm not going to go too much into the books. I talked a little bit about I'm Glad My Mom Died in my September wrap up. So I thought I would just briefly talk about Babel and Trust. Overall, that was a pretty successful reading vlog for me. I was actually very surprised by that because I was expecting to not enjoy some of those books more than what actually happened. When books are overhyped, your expectations for them get really high, and then you end up getting disappointed by them, or at least I end up getting disappointed by them just because I'm expecting more from them than what they can deliver. However, I think I've gotten to the point now where when a book gets really overhyped, I now assume that I'm not going to like the book because they're overhyped, and then I end up actually enjoying the books. So I basically created a reverse psychology on myself without meaning to, because I basically went into all 3 of those books expecting to not enjoy them. In the end, I did end up enjoying all 3, although I did have some issues with Trust. But to give you a general sense of my feelings on the book, for Babel by R.F. Kuang, I really enjoyed that one a lot. It'll probably be on my favorites of the year list. It hits a lot of things that I really enjoy, the sort of school setting, the conversations around colonialism and things like that really hit home for me. There's some things with the ending that I had quibbles with, which again, you can watch the reading vlog to get more of my detailed thoughts on the book, but overall I really enjoyed my experience reading that book. Trust by Hernan Diaz is one of those books where I'm I feel like it's buzzy because it's kind of meta, and there's some aspects of the story that I really enjoyed, but overall that one was probably a 3-star read for me. The further I got into it, the less I was enjoying it and things like that. But I do think it was a little bit interesting to see how he decided to structure the book and things like that and provide reveals, and there's a potentially interesting conversation to be had about things like history and truth and what actually happens versus what gets recorded and things like that, and how the stories that we think we know about people, especially well-known people, how true are they really? But it is a book that feels a little bit like it's trying a little bit too hard. I generally have issues with books that are nominated for the Man Booker Prize. They always just feel a little bit too try hard for me, and this one definitely fell into that camp. But I did at least finish it and things like that, which is probably more than I expected for myself. So yeah, definitely go check out that reading vlog. I feel like it's a pretty successful one, probably because I am reading really popular books. But I had a lot of fun reading the books for that reading vlog, and I kind of want to do another round of that, of just kind of seeing what are the books that everyone's talking about right now, and then reading them myself, which in general is not a bad thing. All right, so I have 2 other books that I read in the month of October. The first one is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu, Mandanna, and this one was sent to me by Berkeley. This is a book I picked up because I was oh, it's October. Let me read something that feels relatively adjacent to Halloween. I'm not someone who reads horror or anything along those lines, but I was a book about witches. Yeah, that seems about right. So in this story, you are mainly following this character named Mika, who is a witch. She has been taught that she needs to hide her magic because the world at large generally will not react well to witches, and a lot of times when witches gather together in large groups, bad things tend to happen. That's what's been taught to her. And now she's probably in her 20s and things like that, and she has started posting on social media about being a witch, but she basically brushes it off as oh, I'm just saying I'm a witch on social media, but no one's going to believe it because it's social media, etc., etc. But then one day she gets a message through her social media accounts basically asking her to come to this one house. The adults in this house want to hire Mika because the children who live in this house are witches. And so the kids here are all adopted or something along those lines. They want to hire Mika to help teach them about magic and things like that, so that way they can, get a grasp on what's happening. But of course, there's much more happening in this house than just that, and Mika ends up getting pulled into the lives of all these different people who live in this house, including this cranky retired teacher named Jamie. It's like a combination of a contemporary romance, but with like witches just being a normal part of life sort of thing built into it as well. This book I saw being comped a lot as being for people who enjoyed The House of the Cerulean Sea, which I definitely think it has like some of those similar cozy vibes to it. So if you are someone who enjoys those sorts of like cozy stories, if you don't mind a romance story, then this is worth picking up. It was really cute. It's very like predictable though, so like don't go into this expecting big twists and turns, because like there are a couple of reveals that happen at the end of the book, don't get me wrong, that I thought were very interesting and unique, but it very much is like a happily ever after story. So it's a romance, which, you know, that's the MO of romances. But yeah, it was like a book where I was just like, yeah, I know exactly where this is headed and things like that. And so it's hard for me to give this like higher than like a 3.5 rating, because like for me, I need something like really big to happen in order for it to raise to a higher level. But it's a really cute, quick read. Again, cozy romance, really fun and lighthearted and things like that, which I definitely needed in the month of October. The other book I finished in the month of October was Silent Parade by Keigo Higashino, and this was translated from the Japanese by Giles Murray. So this is a mystery book, and this is part of the Detective Galileo series. So if you read Devotion of Suspect X or Salvation of a Saint, this is all part of the exact same series of mystery books. So this is kind of a difficult mystery book to explain because it feels like there's a lot of different parts to this story. You start off finding out about this woman who goes missing, and then her body is one day found in this house that burns down, or like the remains are found in this house that burns down. And you find out like that the man who they think did it ended up not being charged for the crime. And then you find out that this man who they think did it could have also been involved in another disappearance, and this time of like a young girl. And so what ends up happening is that the man who ends up as a suspect in these crimes ends up dead. And then you kind of follow this small community of people who are all kind of connected to this first woman's disappearance and death, like connected to her life originally. You find out that they all potentially have a part to play in something bigger that's happening. And in the story, you're basically like reading about all of these different characters and following the police and detectives as they're trying to put together the pieces of what happened in this man's death. Basically, like all of the people who you think could be potential suspects all have like really solid alibis. So it's just like, what the heck is going on? So I first read the Devotion of Suspect X years ago, and I absolutely loved it. And I've been slowly working my way through Keigo Higashino's books ever since. The reason why I really enjoyed them is because they remind me of like Agatha Christie books and Sherlock Holmes books and things like that. These sort of like golden age mysteries where it's not so much like a thriller. It's just like, here's a crime that has happened and here's detectives putting the pieces together. But this is also a Japanese mystery. So like the way that the story is told and set up is all a little bit different than Western mysteries are told as well. So like reading this book, the reason why I had such a hard time doing a synopsis is because you're reading this book and you're not really sure like which mystery exactly are we solving here. Like it feels like there's a couple different mysteries at play. There's a lot of like assumptions being made. And so it's like the detectives are simultaneously trying to show that this man was involved in these 2 other mysteries that occurred, but also you're trying to solve the mystery of this guy dying. And so there's a lot of like moving pieces in this story. And so for a lot of this book, I was just like, I genuinely don't know what's going to happen here. Like I wasn't even sure like what was going to get solved by the end of the story. So there's a lot of setup that takes place in this story, and it takes a while before you get into the meat of the mystery itself. And so if you're someone who just wants to get straight into the mystery, maybe avoid this one. But if you're okay with a decent amount of setup before getting into the actual mystery aspect of it, then, you know, give this one a shot. It definitely feels like Keigo Higashino is trying to do something a little bit different with this book, with the way the layers of the mystery are set up, which I can't really blame him for because he's written how many books at this point, so he probably has to keep it somewhat interesting for himself as well. But yeah, overall, like by the end of it, I did really enjoy the story. It's just like for the first like third of it, I was just like, I don't know what's happening. It felt like I was just reading completely different stories, and then eventually you get into the actual mystery and you start to see how all the pieces come together. So if you do give this one a try, I would say like be patient with it. But if you enjoy, again, like these sort of like classic Western mysteries like Agatha Christie and whatnot, then I think that Keigo Higashino is a really good author to check out. So yeah, those are all of the books I have to talk about in this video. I am currently in the middle of some nonfiction books for Nonfiction November. So if you're interested in checking out the books that I potentially will be reading over the course of this month, feel free to check out that video. If you've read any of the books that I talked about here today, feel free to leave a comment down below talking about them, letting me know what you thought of them, or if you have any questions about anything I talked about here, feel free to leave that down in the comments as well. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.